Thank you very much, Dahi and Brandon, and good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, let me wish you all a Happy New Year. I hope 2012 will be a better year for all of us than 2011, and I'm going to take a look at 2012 from the point of view of how I see developments and, of course, from the point of view of the European Commission. I think in 5 to 10 years' time, we will look back on this period as having been a very defining moment in the evolution of the EU. And I'm going to try and give you a sense of how I see the bigger picture. Of course, I'm very conscious as I do this that most predictions of recent times have proved to be wrong and also have been overtaken by events very quickly. But nonetheless, I'll try to give you my sense of how I see things developing. And I thought in these opening remarks, I would just focus on 3 areas, and then we can talk about other areas in the questions and answers afterwards. But the 3 areas I'm going to focus on are, first of all, the emerging new economic governance of the Union. That's probably the topic of the moment. But then to look a little bit at the future shape of the European Union, and in particular the debate that's going on at the moment about the community method versus the intergovernmental method of running the European Union. And I want to finish just with a few words on the next financial perspective, which is going to be a big negotiation that will take place this year, and to not talk about the details of the budget, but to talk about the politics that will be being negotiated. So let me start, first of all, with the emerging economic governance. I think that the European Commission has always been seen as an economic organisation. We see ourselves as more than that, but I think with what's happening now, the Commission will continue to be seen as an economic organisation. The Commission is being given huge new responsibilities and powers, and in my view, very few people realise the extent of what this is going to mean in terms of change for the future. Without going into the details, we are talking about having a future in which national budgets are synchronised, in which the Commission has oversight over national budgets, power to intervene, to call for change in national budgets. Part of this change will be to insist that budgets are based on independent data, published and made public for discussion in advance, and subject to peer review by other member states, particularly in the Council of Finance Ministers. We're also talking about having much more thorough monitoring of national economic developments, early warnings not just on deficits but on debt levels and on imbalances. And I think the introduction of the excessive imbalance procedure is going to be an important piece of this governance architecture for the future, and hopefully will allow us to pick up much earlier on things like housing bubbles, loss of competitiveness, etc. The Commission will also have the power to sanction, to impose fines, and to propose that Member States seek assistance. And if you look at how each of the Euro area countries which are currently receiving programme assistance from the Union have tried to stave that off before they bowed to the inevitable, that will be an important development in the future if the Commission has the authority, let's say, that a country should seek assistance. That will make it almost impossible then, I think, for a country to not seek assistance because the market pressure would be enormous. So these are just some illustrations of how the way that economic policy decisions are taken are going to change in the future and be done much more collectively in the future. And I want to tease out this theme a little bit. From the Commission point of view, it will be a major change in role. We will have to move from having done, I think, some very high quality but rather academic economic analysis to being right in there with each member state as they develop their economic programmes. So I'm not worried about the Commission being able to do that quality of analysis, and we are currently significantly expanding the economic services of the Commission, so recruiting a lot more economists to be able to do this. But it will also mean that we have to have an in-depth knowledge of each member state. Each of the 27 are different, they're at different stages in a cycle, they have different specificities, and so the Commission will have to know that intimately, I would say, as well as any public servant in any one of those 27 countries. And this will probably mean that we will need much more in-country presence. We have an in-country presence in the programme countries at the moment. more and less intense, depending on which country we're talking about. But I think that we will need that active, on-the-ground knowledge in the future. And this will mean a big culture change for the Commission. Those of you who know the Commission well know that we almost pride ourselves on having a thematic knowledge. So Brendan referred to my time in the environment. We know environmental policy very well, but we haven't up to now really had a matrix approach where the geographic dimension is linked up to the thematic, and we will have to have that much more in the future. And I would say not all Commission departments are currently geared up for that. They would not be able to give you an in-depth analysis of Latvia or Malta. They would know about general thematic trends, but not the geographic knowledge that we will have to have in the future. We will also have to do all of this in a real partnership with the Member States. And that's going to require a change of mindset, both in the Commission and in Member States. There is still a little bit of tendency to want to hide things from the Commission. We saw it in the most graphic detail with the Greek statistics of a few years ago, where the Commission sensed that they were not right. But when we asked for powers to audit the national statistics, they were not immediately given to us by the Member States. So it will have to be a different culture for the future. We also, I think this crisis has revealed weak administration in quite a number of Member States, and sometimes even in surprising Member States. So it's going to be a challenge for Member State political and official systems to learn how to work with us, the same as it will be a challenge for us to know the situation on the ground in each Member State much more. And of course, the Commission will have to exercise these new responsibilities with political skill and sensitivity. It won't be enough to have the right economic analysis or the best economic analysis. All of this will have to take into account the different realities in every Member State. And I think that we need to take care in the rules that we are adopting at the moment that we acknowledge that there are political cycles, and that we be able to deal with the political cycles in each Member State at the same time as having much better coordinated economic policies for the future. Of course, all of this new system will only work if the Member States want it to work, if they get behind the recommendations that the Commission will make. And I think in the past we have had too much of a bilateral relationship between the Commission and each Member State. What we now need is, when the Commission makes a recommendation to one or the other, that other Member States will come out and say, yes, the Commission is right and this is what you have to do. That will be the acid test of whether the new economic governance will work. As I see things, we are taking very big decisions at the moment, very quickly and of necessity. But probably in a hurry and without sufficient domestic debate going on in the different Member States. For example, I think that there needs to be a lot more discussion with national parliaments on their role in this new economic governance. The Commission, in the latest proposals that it made in November, have proposed that the Economics Commissioner could be called before a national parliamentary committee to explain how the Commission sees a national budget. Now, if the budgets are synchronised, he or she can hardly be in all 27 countries at the same time, or even in just the 17 Euro countries at the same time. So we will need to develop a much closer working relationship and exchange of information with national parliaments so that they can play their role at the right time in the system. And again, these are a lot of political changes that will be coming domestically in order to accommodate the economic governance that is now being decided European Council after European Council. We all saw recently what happened when the details of the Irish draft budget became public because they had been made available to the German Parliament. We will have to have new ways of dealing with sensitive information. But it's going to be a new world in which even sensitive information has to be shared with other Euro area member states in advance. So these are all things that can be organised technically, but where we have to think through the political implications and gear up the political system for dealing with them. The focus, of course, at the moment is very much on the economic. It's on sorting out the problems of the euro, getting ahead of the curve, putting the right system in place for the future. But the decisions that are being taken now will, of course, have profound political implications for the future. And that's the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is what kind of future European Union is going to emerge from this crisis. both in terms of its governance and in terms of its membership. It's clear, at least to me, it's clear that the euro will be the core of the future European Union. I think that's why you see all of the member states, with the exception of the UK, wanting to be part of the new treaty that's being worked out at the moment. It's also clear that the days of waiting for the slowest ship in the convoy have gone, at least for now. So what I think you will see is a stepping up of the tempo. If all 27 don't want to do something, then those who want to do it will go ahead. We have in the treaty the provision for enhanced cooperation. It hasn't been very much used so far, but I think that there is going to be a lot more of different groupings deciding to go ahead. And the challenge there will be to make sure that when that happens, these different groupings are open to others to join later, that they are not closing off options, but rather allowing countries that want to go ahead to do so, but not in an exclusive way. I think it's also clear, and there's a lot of debate about this at the moment, that the current crisis has revived a little bit tendencies that have always been there towards an intergovernmental approach rather than a community-based approach. Some member states have always preferred it. There's always been a debate since the very beginning of the European Union about whether it's a collective enterprise or whether it's a union of governments. And what you have seen now is pressure coming from some to have intergovernmental structures outside of the EU structures. That's obviously not something that the Commission stands for. The Commission is very firmly on the side of keeping the Union of 27 together. We believe that if the political will is there, there are ways of making things work, even if not everybody does everything at the same time. But we have also seen that where it's not possible to move forward at 27, there's no longer a willingness to take that as meaning that we can't move forward. Hence, we are now, in these days and weeks, going to be negotiating an intergovernmental treaty, which will be outside of the EU treaty, but hopefully will be very compatible with it, and that's what we're working at the moment. I think outside of France and Germany, most of the other member states are not particularly happy with the clear leadership role that they have taken. And I don't want to be misunderstood on this. I think everybody wants the Franco-German partnership to work. Everybody recognises it has been and is the motor of European progress. But how that works is very important, and whether that is a way of making progress which includes everybody, or whether it's a way of setting the pace and then not necessarily involving everybody to the same extent. That's really, I think, one of the challenges that we have at the moment. You don't need me to tell you that there's a lot of grumbling in the margins and a lot of calling on the Commission to be strong and to speak up for the community method, etc. I think that what has happened in this economic crisis has made it much more difficult for the Commission to play its traditional role. First and foremost, the Commission did not have the financial resources to intervene when the crisis hit, did not have the financial resources to bail out the banks, did not have the capacity of national governments. So the national governments had to come to the fore, had to take the decisions, but that of course then profiled the intergovernmental method of taking decisions rather than the community method. But I think, and I hope that you have noticed, that since last summer the Commission has been speaking out and acting much more strongly in support of the community method. And we do this because we think it's the only fair way to represent and respect all member states. I still think our system works better when the Commission puts a proposal on the table that the Commission has worked on, because the Commission is the only organisation that is paid to think 24/7 about where can you find a consensus, how can you find a way of moving the Union forward as a whole. No matter how hard they try, any individual member state that tries to think European inevitably projects its own system on a bigger scale. It's only the Commission is able to know the different specificities across the Union and to put balanced proposals on the table that can rally support. I think it's also important to point out that the European Parliament can only be involved when the Commission puts a proposal on the table. The Parliament is out of the game in the intergovernmental process, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy over time either. So the very fact that the Commission puts proposals on the table, I think, gives the smaller member states something to rally behind. And that's very important, that the smaller member states also speak up for the kind of union that they want to see having in the future. And it is undoubtedly easier for them to come in behind a Commission proposal than when there isn't a Commission proposal on the table. So I would like to see a revival of very strong support from the small member states for the Commission as the body that most closely represents and reflects their interests. And I think there's been a bit of a falling off of that in recent years for a combination of different reasons. But I think just as the Commission is now speaking out much more strongly for the community method, we of course would like to see those messages being taken up and vocally and publicly supported by the smaller member states. I think there is a very real risk of a two-circle EU emerging. You could easily imagine an inner core which would be composed of the Euro member states and then a much wider outer circle. And I think the decisions that the UK will take in the future will be hugely important for the future shape of the Union. I think if the UK chooses to stay in and make it work, we can keep the EU as we know it today. But if they pursue the role of being the Switzerland or the Hong Kong that some in the Tory backbenches and in the city favour, then we could easily move to having a loose outer circle and an inner core. And I think that everybody is conscious that we are coming to one of those crossroad moments. And so everybody is thinking about how to manage this particular political moment. There's very little public debate about this because nobody wants to be seen to be pushing in one direction or another. And I think that it would be wise to take many months to think about the future shape of the Union. But it's very clear, if you put together all the things I've said about a much tighter economic coordination for the euro area and not being willing to wait anymore for the 27th member to come on board, then we are making decisions at the moment that will profoundly affect the future shape of the Union. And this has important implications for enlargement as well. At the December European Council, they had the signing ceremony for the accession of Croatia. So Croatia will join in July 2013. And behind Croatia, there are quite a number of other countries which have the aspiration and the commitment from the Union to become member states one day. It is certainly the case that the bar for membership has been raised. It's now harder to join what is a much more integrated European Union. And some of the reasons why the bar has been raised have to do with drawing conclusions from the accession of Bulgaria and Romania. But it's also very true that the public mood in large parts of the Union is not very pro-enlargement at the moment. And there is a feeling of having too many member states, which is also part of the complex politics that's going on in wanting to see the Euro the Euro member states as the core of the future EU. Of course, it's possible to imagine what I talked about a moment ago, the inner core and the outer circle, but it's also possible to keep the Union together, and that's clearly what the Commission would prefer, by making it possible for all of those who aspire to join the Euro to keep up with what's happening, to keep all the systems open, to keep the single set of institutions in Brussels representing and working for all 27 member states. But these are the choices that will emerge from the decisions that are being taken at the moment. My final and third point in these opening remarks is just to have a quick look at the next financial perspectives. You can hardly imagine a worse time for the Commission to come forward with its request for a new budget. And for a budget that will span the period 2014 to 2020, but that's the time that we live in. And so in the summer of last year, the Commission came forward with its proposals on how we see the next financial perspectives. And we have put now all of the detailed legal proposals on the table. So the Union is ready, at least is equipped, I should say, rather than ready. The Union is equipped with all it needs to take the decisions by the end of this year. I think that you can already see two blocks of member states emerging. You can see the Spend Less Club. They were the 1% club of the last round. And you can see the Friends of Cohesion. So you have two different blocks. And in my view, actually both of them are starting from the wrong point, because they're both starting from the size of the budget rather than starting from a debate about what do we want the European budget to spend and to support financially. And what the Commission has tried to do is to make a proposal for a budget that would support and reflect and help us to be the kind of union we want to be by 2020. And so we have made a proposal to have very integrated policies. It's not a very radical proposal, but it's a serious attempt to link policy and spending. So in the Commission's proposals, we have a lot more ex-ante conditionality, things that countries will have to do before they get the money, and a lot of ex-post conditionality. And this is where I bring my third and my first points together, because one of the debates will be, how can you have macro-fiscal conditionality? The contributing member states are going to be much more strict about the money that goes to the beneficiary member states, in terms of wanting to be sure that a large part of it is used to improve convergence, to improve competitiveness, and not to have the spiralling away from the main developments in the Union that we have seen. I think everybody in this room could give good examples of the positive effects of the structural funds, but I guess quite a few of you could also give examples of where, if you were really objective, you would say the money was not necessarily targeted on the top priorities, where more could have been done if the money was more focused and if there had been a stricter conditionality. And so that's the kind of future that we'll be going into, much more strict conditionality. And I personally think it makes a lot of sense if there are going to be still large amounts of money transferred to different parts of the Union. Then I think it's legitimate for those who provide it from their taxes to say that they want to be sure that it's well spent. So I think it will be a difficult negotiation. I think it will be also a discussion about what kind of union are we going to have for the future. You will have the Friends of Cohesion saying, we need the transfers in order to develop and catch up. You will have those who are the traditional contributing member states saying, times are tough for our taxpayers too. We don't have the same amount of money to transfer to the European Union budget as we had before. So I think it's going to be a very difficult negotiation. And I don't see the union becoming what some people call a transfer union anytime soon. But I do see elements of the debate about a transfer union and how do the core and the periphery relate to each other. And what kind of bargain is going to be struck between them. I think there will be elements of that debate later in the year when we get down to the hard negotiations. So I'd like to maybe just conclude these opening remarks as follows. I think in the middle of the worst crisis that the Union has known since its foundation, we are making actually major changes. From European Council to European Council, maybe it doesn't feel like huge steps are being taken, but if you take a step back and look at all the decisions that have been taken in the last 2 years, then very major changes going on. Some of it has been thought about. I think the Commission was always conscious that the Economic and Monetary Union that was launched more than 10 years ago was not as complete as it should have been, but it was as complete as the political will of the Member States would allow at the time. Now, under pressure of the crisis, we're writing the next chapter. We're putting in all the extra things that, or all the things that were needed and should perhaps have been there from the beginning. Some of what's being decided at the moment is a very short-term reaction to pressure. It won't all be 100% right. Some of it will have to be corrected in time. We've already seen the December European Council come back on, and I think put in the right context, issues like private sector involvement in debt restructuring, etc. So, but a lot of it are things that people have known to be necessary for quite some time. And out of all of this will emerge, I think, a very different kind of European Union, one that is much more integrated on the economic side. This will be inevitably felt as much more intrusive in the domestic affairs of member states. And I think there's a really big need for domestic, political, media and public debate about these issues so that it's understood and digested. Maybe here in Ireland, being one of the programme countries, that debate is already more advanced than it is in other parts of the Union, but we will have to have it right across the Union. But I think that all of that will be put in place and we will make it work. I think the really big battle is going to be over whether we have a more community or a more intergovernmental union for the future. And I don't think that the outcome of that question is not decided yet. It's still being played out month by month as the European Council meets in Brussels. And a lot of it will depend on whether the smaller member states find their voice and whether they speak up for what kind of European Union they want to see in the future. Because I think the decisions that are being taken now will determine the future shape of the Union. Is it going to be a projection forward in time of the kind of Union that we know today? Or is it going to be something different in the future, which would probably involve a smaller core going in a much more integrated direction and then a looser circle around it? And I think one of the key elements in that will be where the UK decides to position itself in these choices to be made. So I'm going to conclude by saying that I think these fundamental decisions have not yet been made, but they will be made in the coming months as we take big decisions on how we want to run our affairs in the future. And I think it's going to be a very interesting journey. So maybe you'll invite me back again and we can see what happened. Thank you very much.